Hey guys, tonight we are leaving the high drama of emperors and gladiators behind. We are pulling off the ancient equivalent of the interstate highway, shaking the dust from our tunics and stepping into a place designed for utter, if slightly grimy, utility, a Roman roadside inn or caupona. I want you to imagine the moment right now you have been walking, or perhaps riding a very uncomfortable, over-packed wagon, along a stretch of the Via Appia, the great paved artery that snakes its way toward Rome. The late afternoon sun is low, making the dust kick up into golden clouds, and every muscle in your body is quietly screaming. The air, thick with the scent of pine, dry earth, and the not-so-distant presence of a cartload of manure, is starting to cool. You hear it before you see it, a dull, rhythmic clanking, a louder burst of human voices, and the distinct, slightly acrid smell of burning wood and stale wine. You finally arrive. The site is less picturesque tavern and more bustling, messy depot. The caupona is a low, stone and wood structure, maybe a 2-story box with a lean-to-stable attached. There's a cacophony of sound right at the entrance. The braying of donkeys, the incessant rattling of wooden wheels, and the shouting of a legionary trying to maneuver his horse through the crowd of merchants. You step over the high sill, a design meant to keep the street grime out, but which mostly serves to trip weary travelers, and the immediate sensory experience is overwhelming. It's dark, almost jarringly so after the bright sun. The main room, the taberna, is a chaos of rough, hewn tables, wooden stools, and people elbow to elbow. It smells intensely of sweat, cheap oil lamps, garum, that pungent, fermented fish sauce that flavors everything in the Roman world, a bit like the ancient equivalent of universally applied ketchup, only fish-eared, and a low, smoky fire from the kitchen area. You realize instantly that this is not a spa vacation. This is a stopover built for survival and basic sustenance. You probably won't survive this week without getting bitten by something or drinking something you shouldn't. Look closer at the patrons. They're a true cross-section of the Roman world, but leaning heavily toward the working class, the travelers, the negotiators, els merchants, and the military detachments. The more respectable, upper-class citizens, the honestiors, they avoid places like this. They'll stay at a private villa or stop at a specialized deversorium, which is the high-end ancient hotel. You, however, are a person of practical means and are stopping at the roadside inn, a choice that prioritizes convenience and cost over comfort. This place is less a relaxing haven and more a functioning piece of the imperial infrastructure. It supports the movement of goods, soldiers, and official correspondence across the massive Roman domain. It's what keeps the empire running, one lukewarm bowl of stew at a time. The noise level is just high enough to be unsettling, a constant, low-grade roar that suggests too many people packed into too little space. A dog gnaws loudly on a bone near your foot. You see a man haggling fiercely over the price of a small bag of grain. The universal language of commerce cutting through the general hubbub. The walls are plastered, but years of smoke and spilled liquids have turned them a dingy, unrecognizable color. There's graffiti scratched into a wooden beam near the hearth, probably a traveler complaining about the food or proclaiming undying love for a local barmaid. Nothing changes, does it? The air feels thick and heavy, almost a physical presence that clings to your skin. The only illumination comes from small, smoky oil lamps, terracotta discs with a wick dipped in oil, and the flickering orange light of the open hearth where the cooking happens. This low, warm light is one of the few truly soothing elements here, casting long, dancing shadows that make the already crowded room feel even more intimate, slightly mysterious. This dimness, though, also gently hides the dirt, which is a key feature of the caupona experience. The floor is likely packed earth or maybe roughly laid stone, constantly being swept but never truly cleaned. It's all part of the charm, the lived-in, honest mess of a place where strangers meet and then disappear with the rising sun. You notice the innkeeper, or capo, moving through the crowd. He's a man of powerful build, probably in his late 50s, with forearms like cured hams and a perpetually harried expression. He doesn't just manage the place, he is the place. He's the cook, the security guard, the bartender, and the occasional fixer of wagons. He is the quiet linchpin of this dusty, loud little world. He catches your eye, not with a welcoming smile, but with a sharp, assessing gaze that calculates your worth, your needs, and your potential for causing trouble. This, you realize, is the man whose humble empire you have just entered. The sheer volume of logistics that this man manages, just by standing here, is a mainstream historical fact that often goes unappreciated. These inns weren't just places to sleep, they were crucial transit hubs. Without them, the Roman army couldn't move, the tax collectors couldn't operate, and the whole imperial economy would grind to a halt. Think of it: every letter, every official decree, every barrel of wine transported over hundreds of miles depended on the existence of this grimy little building. And yet, this reliance often came with a low social standing. Innkeepers were frequently looked down upon, associated with drinking, gambling, and other vices. A funny quirk, considering they were essential service providers. They were the unsung, slightly dubious heroes of ancient infrastructure. This low opinion probably explains why so many innkeepers were former slaves or freedmen, people accustomed to hard work and lacking the social capital to open a more respectable business. You finally secure a spot near a small, raised counter where the food is served. You lean against a wall, feeling the cool stone against your back, the low murmur of Latin and perhaps Oscan or Greek washing over you. A large, earthenware jar sits on the counter, its contents ambiguous but certainly liquid. This is where your first interaction with the Roman roadside cuisine begins. You'll need something to quench the deep thirst of the road, and you know it won't be pure water. That's simply asking for trouble. It's too precious, too likely to be contaminated. Instead, you'll reach for a staple drink, the one that makes your eyes water a little just thinking about it. But which is ultimately safe posca. We will get into the specific liquid horrors and wonders shortly. But for now, you just breathe. You try to filter the sounds. The gentle clack of a stone being ground, the low thrum of a traveler singing a song of the northern frontier, and find a rhythm in the chaos. The dim light, the tired warmth of the room, the certainty that your journey is paused for the night, all combine into a peculiar form of peace. It's not the peace of silence, but the peace of a predictable, functioning system. You are a small cog resting inside the great Roman machine. You know what you need to do next: find the capo, exchange a few bronze coins, and figure out exactly what kind of bedding catastrophe awaits you upstairs. The promise of the inn is simple shelter from the night and food for the morning. Nothing more, nothing less. And sometimes, after a long day under the relentless Mediterranean sun, that basic promise is the most comforting thing in the world. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of posca was primarily for economy, military logistics, or genuine health concerns regarding water quality. But for you right now, it's just the next thing you must swallow. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you are listening from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The innkeeper, the capo you spotted earlier, finally breaks away from the frantic exchange he was having with a mule driver. He approaches you, wiping his hands on a stained leather apron, and you get a closer look. He's not a large man, but he is wary and radiates an exhausted competence. His name, you hear someone call, is Lucius, a typical name for a man who has made his own way. He is indeed a freedman, a former slave who bought his freedom, or was granted it by his former master, and he carries himself with the quiet, hardened authority of someone who knows exactly how to survive in the middle ground of Roman society. His small, sprawling establishment is his humble empire, and you are just a temporary, paying subject. You observe the architecture of this small realm. The caupona is a functional marvel of low-cost, quick construction. Downstairs, you have the central taberna, the taproom and dining area, which serves as the social heart and the economic engine. Behind this, separated by a heavy curtain or a rough wooden partition, is the kitchen, a smoky, dimly lit space dominated by the open hearth and a simple brick oven. Everything is built to be multi-purpose. The low, wide counter where Lucius serves drinks also acts as a secure point for storing his modest takings and separating the chaos of the public space from the slightly less chaotic private areas. Lucius, you notice, doesn't keep his money out in the open. He uses a small, securely bolted wooden chest under the counter, a necessity born from the constant flow of strangers and the high-stakes environment of a roadside stop. The inn's simplicity is its strength. Unlike a fancy Roman domus with its carefully separated rooms for specific social functions, the caupona is all about flow and immediate needs. It's an architectural expression of a tired traveler. Just give me food, drink, and a place to collapse. Above the main room, reachable by a rickety, unadorned wooden stair that creaks loudly with every ascent, are the sleeping quarters. You haven't seen them yet, but you can already hear the low snores and restless shuffling coming from above, a constant reminder of the communal life you are about to join. This two-story setup is typical for a roadside establishment, maximizing space on a small, valuable plot of land right beside the vital highway. It's a pragmatic approach to construction, often involving timber framing and inexpensive stone infill, a far cry from the marble-clad grandeur of the capital. Lucius finally addresses you, his voice gravelly, but surprisingly low and unintrusive despite the noise. He quotes you a single price that covers both a place to sleep and a simple evening meal. You pay him in a few small, tarnished bronze coins, asses or denarii, depending on the period, a reminder of the standardized currency that makes this entire empire work. This is a mainstream historical fact that is easy to overlook. the common currency, and the excellent road network were the two infrastructural pillars that made an establishment like Lucius's caupona viable. You could travel hundreds of miles, and your coins were still valid, your mile markers still accurate. This is Roman efficiency in its most basic, gritty form. As you wait for your meal, you continue to observe Lucius's management style. It's a study in quiet, non-confrontational authority. He doesn't shout, he just moves. He uses sharp gestures and subtle body language to direct his few assistants. Likely other freedmen, or occasionally, trusted slaves, who bust tables, fill jars, and keep the cooking fire stoked. He keeps a careful eye on everyone. An inn like this is always a hotspot for petty crime, not just amongst the patrons, but also by disgruntled employees who might be tempted by the traveler's luggage. Lucius's constant, almost meditative vigilance is what keeps the place from descending into utter chaos. He is the human embodiment of the old-fashioned owner-operator model. There's a slightly quirky or fringe tidbit you notice about his appearance. Across his chest, visible under the open folds of his tunic, is a faint, almost faded tattoo. Many historians agree that tattoos were common among legionaries and certain professional groups in the later empire, often signifying allegiance or rank. Given his demeanor and build, it's a fair guess that Lucius might be a former soldier, perhaps a veteran who decided the quieter, albeit still stressful, life of an innkeeper was preferable to the rigors of campaign. This small detail hints at a fascinating reality. The Roman road system was not just for commerce, it was part of the military infrastructure, and many of the services along it were provided by people with military ties. He might have paid for his inn with a military pension, or with savings amassed during his service. The life of a legionary veteran often provided the capital and discipline needed to run a tough business like this. As a quick joke, you wonder if his former drill sergeant would approve of the quality of the floor sweeping, or if he'd be making Lucius mop the dirt floor with his tunic. You notice a small shrine in the corner, close to the hearth. It's simple, probably just a recessed niche in the wall, holding a few small, roughly carved wooden or terracotta figures. These are the Lares and penates, the household and store, cupboard gods. Even in this rough, commercial setting, the ancient Roman piety is present. They are the gentle protectors of the home, and the source of its meager prosperity. Travelers often make a small offering here, a pinch of salt or a drop of wine, for a safe journey and an untroubled night. It provides a quiet, spiritual counterpoint to the raucous human activity nearby. It's a good reminder that despite the grime and the noise, this is still someone's home, guarded by ancient, predictable gods. Lucius motions you over with a slight inclination of his head, inviting you to sit at a cleared section of a long, communal table. The surface of the table is scarred with knife cuts and stains from millennia of spilled beverages. You sit, grateful to rest your tired legs. You notice a small, worn abacus beside his temporary workspace. No fancy calculations here, just simple beads and careful counting. This inn, as small as it is part of a complex, cash, flow-dependent business. Lucius has to track his supplies of oil, grain, and, most importantly, wine. He can't afford to be cheated, and he can't afford to run out. As you wait for your bowl of puls or perhaps some coarse bread, the scholarly debate concerning the social mobility of innkeepers surfaces. Historians still argue whether a man like Lucius, a freedman running a caupona, genuinely improved his social standing, or simply traded one form of servitude for another, the servitude to the demanding road and its endless stream of weary customers, while he owns his business and is not legally bound to a master. His life is defined by constant, grueling labor and a certain amount of social exclusion. He is a capitalist, yes, but one operating on the absolute margins of respectability. He is tied to the whims of the road, the weather, and the Roman bureaucracy. This quiet battle for respect and stability is part of the story woven into the rough fabric of this inn. You watch as a young boy, perhaps one of Lucius's assistants, brings you a small, shallow bowl and a wooden spoon. The food is finally here, and with it, the promise of a quiet stomach and the impending descent into sleep. You take a breath. The air is momentarily clearer as the door briefly opens and closes, and you prepare to confront the strange, simple menu of the Roman road. You've got your spot at the communal table, the flickering lamplight warming the rough wood. And now comes the critical moment, the confrontation with the strange nightly menu. The food at a caupona is never going to be gourmet. It's designed for high caloric content, quick preparation, and extreme economy. Lucius, the innkeeper, isn't aiming for flavor. He's aiming for survival and profit. Your meal arrives. It is likely a bowl of puls, the ancient Roman porridge. Think of it as the foundational Roman meal, made from coarsely ground grains, usually spelt or emmer wheat, boiled in water. It's thick, bland, and incredibly filling. It's what powers the farmer, the soldier, and the weary traveler like you. To give it any flavor, you might have been given a dollop of garum maize, that ubiquitous fermented fish sauce we mentioned, the salt and umami of the ancient world, or perhaps a few dried lentils mixed in. You eat it slowly, deliberately, the simple warmth of the food a genuine comfort after a day on the dusty road. It's not enjoyable, but it is deeply satisfying in a basic, evolutionary sense. The real challenge, and the cornerstone of the inn's beverage selection, is the wine. You know better than to ask for pure, unadulterated wine, the merum. That's a luxury, rarely served straight, and often reserved for the honestiores or formal dining. Here, the wine is cheap, coarse, and aggressively doctored. It's usually a strong, dark vintage, perhaps from a local vineyard that couldn't sell its better product, and it is routinely cut with water, sometimes significantly, to make it stretch and, ironically, safer to drink than the local well water. The scholarly debate about this ubiquitous watering habit is interesting. Historians still argue whether the practice of heavily watering wine was solely for social convention or a necessary hygienic measure. Romans genuinely believed that drinking pure wine was barbaric, associated with uncivilized peoples. It was a sign of refinement to mix it, but practically, it also meant the wine could be distributed widely and cheaply, reducing the alcohol content just enough to prevent outright drunkenness among a crowd of working men who needed to be back on the road at dawn. The cheap wine itself, thick and often slightly sour, was a powerful counterpoint to the bland puls. But the truly iconic, strange drink of the Roman road is the aforementioned posca. Lucius has a large jar of it behind the counter, served freely to those who can't afford even the cheapest watered wine, or for the legionaries who are only permitted this on campaign. Posca is a quintessential fringe tidbit of Roman daily life, a drink that sounds utterly unappetizing to modern palates. It's essentially vinegar, sour wine mixed with water, and sometimes a few herbs to mask the flavor. It sounds awful, but it served several critical functions. First, the acidity of the vinegar acted as a purifier, killing off many of the nasties lurking in the water, making it a surprisingly safe military staple. Second, the slight kick of flavor was a morale booster. And third, it was incredibly cheap to produce. You take a sip of the stuff. It's sharp, tangy, and immediately wakes up your mouth. It's the ancient Roman equivalent of a sports drink, restorative, acidic, and just barely palatable. You have to admit, it beats that crocodile dung sunscreen you heard about in the Levant. In terms of meat, if you're lucky, Lucius might have some scraps of salted pork fat or a small, oily sausage called a lucanica, a heavily spiced, preserved option that wouldn't spoil quickly. Roman roadside innkeepers were legally restricted from serving certain types of food in some eras, like freshly slaughtered, expensive cuts of meat, which were reserved for private homes or specialized butcher shops. Messalem. This constraint forced them to rely on inexpensive, non-perishable staples grains, pulses, beans and lentils, cheese, dried fruits, and preserved meats. Everything on the menu reflects a life governed by the twin demands of the road: travel, friendly storage, and maximum profit margin. The kitchen itself, visible through the curtain, is a quirky detail. It is smoky, and the cooking equipment is minimal, a few tripods set over the open fire for boiling pots, and the small brick oven used primarily for baking the coarse bread and heating up dishes. There's a noticeable absence of fresh produce, a reality of being located away from urban centers or wealthy villas with their hortus garden. Lucius relies entirely on what can be preserved or easily transported. This reliance on a preserved, dry diet is what makes a stop here so necessary. You need a hot meal to break the routine of cold, dry rations you carry yourself. As you finish your puls, you note a mainstream historical fact. The consumption of bread, els panis, and olives was the central pillar of the Roman diet, and it remains so here. The bread is a heavy, round loaf, likely made from coarse barley or whole wheat, dark in color and dense enough to serve as a platter. It's often dipped in olive oil, a quick, efficient way to deliver essential fats and calories. You tear off a piece, dip it quickly into the small pot of oil Lucius provides, and chew slowly, letting the simplicity of the meal bring a quiet calm. Lucius is a practical businessman, and this shapes his menu. He's not going to offer delicate fish or seasonal vegetables. He offers what sustains the traveler and what can be sourced reliably, day in and day out, regardless of the season or the state of the surrounding farmlands. He provides certainty, not surprise. This predictable simplicity, this culinary low-hum, is exactly what makes the caupona so soothing in a way. You know exactly what you're getting, and what you're getting is a solid, historical meal that has fueled legions and merchants for centuries. It's food that puts you firmly and peacefully in the ancient world. You push your bowl aside, finished. Time to address the final frontier of the roadside inn, the upstairs. With your stomach settled by the bland yet effective puls and the slightly aggressive tang of posca, it is time to face the inevitable reality of Roman roadside rest, the lodging and its uncomfortable truths. You approach the rickety wooden stair, your muscles protesting a little, and ascend to the upper floor, the caupona's designated sleeping area. The stairs creak loudly, a sonic announcement of your every move, which is par for the course in this communal environment. Upstairs, the darkness is more profound, broken only by slivers of moonlight filtering through small, unglazed window openings, more like vents than proper windows, offering little defense against the chill or the insects. The air is immediately different, warmer, heavier, and thick with the mixed sense of unwashed bodies, stale breath, leather, wood smoke clinging to clothing, and, inevitably, the faint but persistent smell of rodents. This is the dormitory, the great communal sleeping hall. There are no private rooms here, not at this price point. The entire floor is one large space, and your bed is not a bed as you might think of it. It's a low, simple wooden platform or bench, perhaps just a raised area of the floor, covered with a thin straw mattress or calcita, and a coarse woolen blanket. These sleeping platforms are arranged side by side, long rows of uncomfortable proximity. You pick a spot that seems marginally less crowded than the others. A hopeful, yet ultimately futile, endeavor, and begin to prepare for the night. The major, undeniable, uncomfortable truth of the caupona is the vermin. It is a constant, low-level war waged against fleas, bedbugs, and lice. They are an inescapable reality of communal, crowded sleeping conditions with straw bedding that is rarely, if ever, properly cleaned or changed. You can feel the distinct itchiness of the mattress as you settle down. This fight against tiny, biting creatures is a ubiquitous, yet often forgotten, part of ancient life, and it's a necessary, slightly humorous reality check that even the mighty Roman Empire couldn't solve the problem of public hygiene at a granular level. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen. Seems like the ancient world was full of peculiar, yet necessary, coping mechanisms. The noise is another pervasive element. The low snores you heard earlier now become individual, distinct sonic assaults. A deep rumble from a sleeping mule driver, a sharp cough from a merchant, the clop, clop, clop of the innkeeper Lucius moving downstairs, still tending to the late arrivals. Historians still argue whether Romans preferred quiet sleep, or if they were accustomed to this level of constant auditory background. But for you, the noise is intrusive. Sleep here requires a kind of mental surrender to the environment, a letting go of the expectation of silence. You quickly learn the rules of this communal space. The most valuable commodity here, besides your own life, is your small bag of belongings. There are no lockers, no secure chests. Your few possessions, a change of clothes, perhaps some personal documents, a bit of dried meat, must serve as your pillow, tucked securely under your head. This vigilance, even in exhaustion, is the silent, shared understanding among the travelers. Trust is a scarce resource on the road. As you lie down, you reflect on a mainstream historical fact. The communal sleeping arrangements of the caupona were a significant marker of its low social status. Wealthy Romans would never sleep like this, shoulder to shoulder with strangers, regardless of their profession. This is the domain of the plebeians, the working class, the soldiers, the merchants, and the slaves. It reinforced the social hierarchy, even in the middle of the night. A quirky or fringe tidbit of Roman sleep culture. Some travelers might carry a small, portable mattress or blanket roll with them, a slightly more expensive personal item that provides a marginal increase in comfort and, crucially, a small barrier against the worst of the inn's vermin. If you were slightly better off, you might have invested in a roll made of goat hair or densely packed wool. Looking around, you see one man has done exactly this, a small, selfish island of slightly better comfort in the sea of rough straw. You close your eyes, attempting to focus on the distant, low sound of the night. Outside, the ambient sounds of the cursus publicus, the official postal and transport system, continue the occasional, rhythmic jingle of harness bells as a late courier gallops past, or the deep, steady breathing of the oxen in the stable below. These sounds, constant and predictable, eventually begin to blend into a gentle, historical hum. The creaking of the wood, the soft snuffling of a dog, the low drone of an oil lamp left burning near the stairs. It's all part of the sleep soundtrack of the Roman world. You try to find a comfortable position, a final maneuver that might trick your exhausted body into submission. The straw crackles beneath you. You pull the coarse blanket up to your chin, finding a small, momentary pocket of personal warmth. You are safe from the elements and the dangers of the open road, and for now, that is enough. The constant low chatter and movement eventually lose their distinctness, becoming a kind of white noise. You are one of hundreds, maybe thousands of travelers across the vast empire, all resting in similar, noisy, unhygienic, yet fundamentally necessary spots. You drift, not into silence, but into the deep, shared murmur of the ancient world. You survived the night, or at least the part of the night, where you were awake and contemplating the proximity of your sleeping neighbor. Now, with the faint, cold light of dawn filtering in through the ventilation slits, the whole atmosphere of the caupona begins to shift dramatically. The deep, loud rhythms of sleep are replaced by the frantic, low-grade chaos of a world waking up to its obligations. This is the early morning rush, and it immediately illuminates the inn's vital role as a hub of commerce and communication. You descend the creaking stairs, already feeling the shift in temperature as the kitchen fire is aggressively stoked back to life. The air is smoky again, but now cut with the more pleasant, sharper smell of baking bread and the metallic tang of fresh water being poured. This morning's scramble is fundamentally driven by the road's commerce. The people here are not tourists. They are workers with schedules dictated by the sun and the empire's infrastructure. Mule drivers are already outside, shouting softly at their animals, loading heavy packs that groan with trade goods, perhaps barrels of wine, amphorae of olive oil, bolts of rough wool, or large, tightly bound bundles of papyrus scrolls. You witness the exchange of goods right in the taberna. Merchants are settling their debts from the night before, exchanging coins and making quick promises for future meetings. Lucius, the innkeeper, is at his most efficient, dispensing small pieces of coarse bread and perhaps a slice of hard cheese. The quick, fuel-efficient breakfast of the Roman road. He moves with a focused energy, taking payments and directing traffic with sharp, non-verbal cues. This transaction of small, daily commerce is the lifeblood of the empire, facilitated by the simple services provided here. More dramatically, you observe the crucial role this inn plays in the postal system, the cursus publicus. The Roman state ran an incredibly efficient and mandatory courier service for official correspondence. At dawn, a rider, a tabularius, who arrived late last night, is preparing his mount. He's often a young man, lean and purposeful, carrying a sealed pouch of documents. The caupona, or an adjacent, officially designated stable, provides him with a fresh horse and necessary provisions. This ensures the rapid movement of imperial news, decrees, and military orders across vast distances. This is a crucial mainstream historical fact. The roads and the rest stops were first and foremost for the state. If you are delayed because a cursus publicus rider needs the best horse, well, that's just how the empire works. You grab your own small breakfast, some bread dipped in wine, maybe, or a little of the leftover puls from last night, now eaten cold. It's quick, designed to be consumed standing up or while tending to your own gear. A quirky or fringe tidbit of this morning routine involves the cleaning, or lack thereof. The straw from the beds is often simply shaken out and the rough woolen blankets folded. The dirt floor is briefly swept, but the general principle is one of minimal effort. Lucius must balance the need for basic sanitation with the urgency of getting everyone out and preparing for the next influx of travelers arriving later in the day. The turnover is fast and the standards are low. You notice a man, a negotiator merchant, carefully securing a small, heavy box to his wagon. He speaks a dialect you don't quite recognize, perhaps a native from Gaul or a Greek-speaking trader from the East. This physical connection between disparate parts of the Roman world, all converging on Lucius's dusty doorstep, is powerful. He may be carrying valuable pottery, fine linens, or even exotic animals for a menagerie back in Rome. It highlights the vast scope of the imperial economy that depends on this simple stop. The philosophical implication of this logistical efficiency starts to dawn on you. Historians still argue whether the extreme centralization and reliance on the cursus publicus ultimately helped or hurt the long-term economic independence of smaller towns. Did the convenience of the imperial road network smother local enterprise by funneling all major trade through these state-dependent channels? It's a quiet debate that plays out in the simple exchanges happening around you. As the sun fully crests the horizon, the great wave of departures begins. The air is filled with the rhythmic clop of hoofs, the struss of wheels on the paved road, and the gentle final jingle of harness bells. The patrons melt away, pulling their wagons and pushing their animals back onto the great artery of the Roman road. You watch the space empty out rapidly. In less than an hour, the noisy, chaotic crowd is gone, leaving behind only Lucius and his small crew, starting the arduous work of washing out jars and preparing for the next wave. The inn, briefly noisy, now settles into a temporary, expectant calm. You, too, must rejoin the flow, your body now sufficiently fueled, your mind rested, ready for the next leg of your journey. You are an element of the road once more. With the last of the morning traffic melting away, the caupona enters a period of relative, almost disarming calm. It's during this mid-morning lull that you often observe the most fascinating part of the roadside inn, the truly oddly exotic cargo and the unusual people who pass through, while the majority of the traffic is local merchants and military logistics. The Roman road system, stretching from Britannia to Mesopotamia, guarantees a sprinkling of the profoundly foreign. Lucius, the innkeeper, uses this quiet time to oversee the cleaning and resupply, but even he pauses when a particularly unusual contingent pulls up. You see them now, a small group that doesn't belong to the usual rhythm of the road. Perhaps it's a spice trader from the Silk Routes, his cart laden with sacks of pepper, cinnamon, and cloves. These are not merely aromatic goods. They represent the vast, quiet reach of the empire's economic interests. The very smell emanating from his cart, sweet, warm, and entirely alien to the local air, is a reminder of the global nature of Roman commerce. The trader himself, with his fine linens and sun-darkened skin, is a study in cultural difference, communicating with Lucius through a mix of broken Latin and universal hand gestures for money and quantity. This observation brings up a crucial mainstream historical fact. The Roman economy was deeply reliant on long-distance trade. The price of an inn meal, the comfort of your woolen blanket, and the flavor of the garum all trace their origins back to a highly organized network of sea and land routes. The presence of these negotiators, fettles traders, from distant lands highlights the logistical miracle of getting valuable, small goods, like a few ounces of saffron or a bolt of Chinese silk, all the way to Rome. Now for a genuinely quirky or fringe tidbit that sometimes graces Lucius's doorstep: traveling entertainers. Not the high-status poets or philosophers, but the itinerant performers, the jugglers, acrobats, or, most intriguingly, the handlers of exotic animals. Imagine the sudden, gentle thud of a small monkey or an unusual bird cage being unloaded from a wagon. These entertainers move slowly, from town to town, performing for coins in local fora, public squares. Their presence in the caupona is brief but memorable, bringing a flash of color, music, and the slightly disconcerting odor of unwashed animal to the otherwise mundane surroundings. You watch one such handler briefly feed his animal, a small, brightly colored parrot that squawks a surprisingly clear, if repetitive, word in Greek. A surreal moment of international absurdity. It's certainly a better roommate than the person snoring next to you last night. Another category of unusual cargo involves religious pilgrims or minor dignitaries from recently conquered territories. They might be carrying local crafts, sacred objects, or even petitions for the imperial administration. Their clothing, their mannerisms, and their quiet deference stand out against the rough and tumble swagger of the mule drivers. They are a tangible reminder that Roman peace, the Pax Romana, is a patchwork of 1,000 local traditions now governed by a single, distant power. The constant movement of people through the inn also feeds the ever-present rumor mill. Historians still argue whether the caupona served as a more reliable conduit for local news and imperial gossip than official channels. The news of a successful military campaign, the passing of a local governor, or a change in the price of grain would travel faster by word of mouth in places like this than by official courier. The inn is a nexus of information, where fact and rumor mix like the posca and water, often with equally questionable results. Lucius, standing at the center of this flow, is a reluctant curator of the empire's whispered history. You watch as the spice trader pays Lucius for his brief rest and continues his journey. The transaction is quiet, respectful, based on the mutual understanding of two professionals in the world of logistics. The brief, fragrant trace of cardamom and ginger fades quickly, replaced by the persistent smell of wood smoke and old wine. The inn returns to its functional simplicity. It is this gentle oscillation, from the deep chaos of the night to the brief, exotic interruption of the morning, that defines the uniquely peaceful, if slightly bizarre, rhythm of life at a Roman roadside inn. You realize that by simply resting here, you've participated in a chain of global commerce that connects the distant Himalayas to the heart of the Mediterranean. You are a quiet witness to the beating heart of the Roman road. As the morning's intense flow of travelers subsides, the focus turns to the most basic, yet most precarious, resource of the roadside inn: water, health, and gentle jokes. Lucius, the innkeeper, knows that his entire business and the health of his customers hinges on a constant, clean enough supply of water. You observe one of Lucius's assistants carefully drawing water, likely from an on-site well or cistern. This is a critical point. While major Roman cities were renowned for their monumental aqueducts, a small roadside caupona relied on local sources. This reliance meant that water quality was highly variable, often compromised by runoff or shallow sources. This is a crucial mainstream historical fact. The splendor of Roman engineering didn't extend equally to every provincial tavern. This precariousness explains why so many travelers preferred doctored beverages like wine or posca, the vinegar-water mix, because the fermentation or the acidity offered a measure of microbial protection. The constant concern over hygiene in such a crowded, transient environment leads to a certain set of behaviors, some pragmatic, some slightly comical. Lucius uses a strong, scented oils, not olive oil, but a cheap, simple oil to clean his hands and the counter surfaces. He doesn't have soap as we know it. That's a much later invention for widespread use. But he has a practical understanding that grease and dust must be removed to prevent sticky surfaces. You notice that he also keeps a large basin of water near the entrance for travelers to wash their feet and hands before eating. This is a small, sensible effort that often falls short, but shows a basic awareness of cleanliness. A quirky or fringe tidbit involves the inn's latrine, or forica. It's likely a very basic, shared ditch or pit outside, maybe sheltered by a flimsy partition. Roman public latrines, particularly in cities, were often elaborate, communal affairs where men sat shoulder to shoulder, chatting and socializing while conducting their private business. Here at the caupona, it's purely functional and deeply unglamorous. However, the custom of having a small bowl of vinegar or scented herbs nearby to mask the odor, even in this rudimentary facility, hints at a persistent Roman desire for order and pleasant scents, even in the most unpleasant places. You think to yourself that a modern hotel lobby could learn a thing or two from the Roman commitment to scent management. The need for levity, a gentle joke to cut the tension of the road, often arises when dealing with the physical realities of travel. Travelers share stories of digestive woes, of bad water, and of the peculiar foods they ate that caused trouble. The Roman traveler, like any traveler today, relied on shared misery to find humor. Lucius, with his gravelly voice, might crack a wry joke about a previous guest who swore the posca was responsible for his sudden burst of energy, which was clearly just a desperate dash to the latrine. This self-deprecating humor about the body and its functions is a universal comfort on the road. The underlying scholarly debate here is whether the widespread health problems of the Roman Empire were predominantly caused by dietary deficiencies, poor sanitation in dense urban areas, or the constant low-level microbial assault that occurred in places like roadside inns. Historians still argue whether the frequency of waterborne illnesses was the primary limiting factor on the population density along major transportation routes. Was the simple act of stopping for the night often a high-stakes gamble with one's own health? For you, the answer is a cautious one. You watch what you drink, you eat mostly the coarse, boiled staples, and you trust that Lucius's well is not too close to his makeshift latrine. You watch as Lucius pauses his work, takes a deep breath, and uses a bit of the precious well water to splash his face. He's taking a momentary break, observing the peaceful mid-day road. The heat is building again, and soon the next wave, perhaps a small cohort of soldiers or a group of wealthier travelers seeking a midday break, will arrive. But for now, the air is clean, the dust is settled, and the silence is a small, earned luxury that defines this quiet middle of the day. As the quiet mid-day stretches into the late afternoon, the caupona begins its subtle transformation into an evening leisure spot, or at least, the Roman roadside version of one. This is the time for gaming, gossip, and gentle humor as the next wave of weary travelers begins to arrive, seeking rest before nightfall. You secure a quiet corner, watching the patrons settle in. The evening entertainment here isn't provided by high-paid actors or a private orchestra. It is self-generated, fueled by fatigue, cheap wine, and the human need for connection. The most visible pastime is gaming. Patrons gather around the rough tables for a round of board games. The most common one you see is ludus dudecim scriptorum, game of 12 marks, or, more popular still, tabula tabled, an ancestor of modern backgammon. This game is fast-paced, relies on a combination of luck dice rolls, often using astragali or knuckle bonus and strategy, and usually involves low-stakes gambling. The gentle, rhythmic clatter of the dice being thrown into a small box, and the click of the pieces moving across the board, is a deeply soothing, predictable sound that fills the taberna. The rules are simple enough that a merchant from Gaul can quickly play against a soldier from Syria. This love for gambling and board games is a crucial mainstream historical fact of Roman life. It wasn't restricted to the wealthy. Even the working class indulged. For a brief moment, the dice rolls, a symbol of chance and fate, level the playing field between the exhausted slave and the mid-level official. This communal, low-level gambling often led to an eruption of good-natured gentle humor, a quick jest about a rival's bad luck, or a shared groan when the house rules are slightly bent. Lucius, the innkeeper, has a strict policy against excessive debt or overt fighting. His business depends on a certain degree of peace. He's often the quiet, non-playing referee. But the real currency of the evening is gossip. This is where the caupona truly becomes an information nexus. Travelers exchange news from the cities they've left and warnings about the roads ahead. You hear whispers about the price of grain in Rome, the latest political squabble in a provincial capital, or the outrageous behavior of a minor official. The gossip is rarely sensational or scandalous, but rather practical and deeply human. It's the low, constant drone of shared information, a psychological release after a long day of solitary travel. You listen to a mule driver complain, with perfect, historical sarcasm, about his animal's stubbornness, comparing it favorably to a certain governor's slowness to pay his taxes. A quirky or fringe tidbit of Roman roadside culture is the tradition of travelers leaving graffiti behind. We saw some earlier, but the evening's atmosphere often encourages it. these scribbles on the walls or carved into the wooden beams. Sometimes simple, sometimes crudely drawn, act as ancient Roman reviews. They complain about the quality of the wine, praise a fellow traveler, or simply mark their presence. These aren't high art, they are the ephemeral, humble voices of the transient common people, a delightful, unmonitored record of daily frustration and small victories. You chuckle, imagining the ancient equivalent of a one-star review. Lucius's posca tastes like a legionary's boot. This social interaction and the spread of non-official news brings up an interesting scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the perceived moral decay associated with caupona, the gambling, drinking, and loose talk, was a genuine threat to Roman social order or simply a convenient moral scapegoat used by the elite to criticize the activities of the lower classes. Was this truly a den of iniquity, or just a working-class social club with slightly rougher edges? For you, sitting here, it feels like the latter, a necessary pressure release valve for the stresses of imperial life. The oil lamps are lit again, casting the same warm, dancing shadows as the night before. The sound of the dice and the low murmur of tired, relieved voices create a uniquely enveloping auditory blanket. The day's journey is truly over. The focus has shifted from movement to rest, from commerce to simple companionship. This transition from the external, dusty road to the internal, smoky warmth of the inn is perhaps the deepest source of the oddly peaceful feeling you experience. You are safe, you are fed, and you are surrounded by others who share your exhaustion. You may not be in a palace, but in this moment, you are perfectly placed within the great historical narrative. You close your eyes briefly, letting the gentle, predictable soundscape wash over you, preparing for the final surrender to sleep. As the night deepens, the atmosphere in Lucius's caupona becomes quieter, almost reverent, as the focus shifts from raucous social interaction to more personal, domestic comforts. Even in this rough, commercial setting, the Roman attachment to ritual and the divine is palpable, centered around the few small areas that feel like a true home: the hearth and the small shrine. This is where you observe the gentle mythology of the hearth. You notice again the small niche near the central cooking area, likely warmed by the residual heat of the banked fire. This little alcove is dedicated to the Lares and penates, the ancient household and store, cupboard gods that we briefly noted upon arrival. These are not the grand, powerful deities of the Roman state, Jupiter or Mars, but humble, protective spirits of the domestic sphere. They are the true patrons of Lucius's small empire, watching over the food, the stock, and the safety of the household. The presence of this shrine is a crucial mainstream historical fact. Roman religious practice was intensely personal and practical. Before settling in for the night, a few travelers, and certainly Lucius himself, make small, almost silent gestures toward the shrine. It might be a momentary pause, a brief whispered prayer for a safe journey tomorrow, or a tiny offering of a pinch of salt or a drop of the cheap wine. These are acts of propitiation, not elaborate public rites. They provide a vital, quiet sense of security and certainty in a world defined by the random, unpredictable dangers of the road. The Lares, in particular, are associated with the crossroads and the home's boundaries, making them especially appropriate deities for an inn sitting right on the major Roman highway. They watch over the constant movement and ensure that what comes in peace departs in peace. This gentle, domestic piety offers a profound counterpoint to the earlier chaos of commerce and gambling. It's a quiet acknowledgement that, despite the tough realities of life on the road, one is still under a form of divine protection. A quirky or fringe tidbit involves the specific forms the Lares might take. They are often depicted as dancing, youthful figures, sometimes holding a drinking horn or a bowl. You see one small terracotta figure on Lucius's shrine, roughly modeled, perhaps chipped, that looks less like a god and more like a happy, slightly tipsy child. This rough, approachable aesthetic highlights the intimate, non-intimidating nature of these domestic cults. They are the friendly, familiar faces of the divine, quietly ensuring the storehouse doesn't run empty and the roof doesn't leak. You briefly wonder if the dancing Lares are also responsible for the subtle, rhythmic creaking of the floorboards upstairs, a kind of eternal party. The scholarly debate tied to this practice centers on the sincerity of these private acts of worship. Historians still argue whether the maintenance of these domestic cults, particularly by the working classes and those on the road, represented a deep personal conviction, or was simply a cultural habit designed to maintain social stability and psychological comfort. Was the offering a moment of true faith, or a quick, pragmatic insurance policy against bad luck? For you, the weary traveler, the distinction doesn't much matter. The quiet presence of the shrine and the soft, familiar ritual of the offering contribute to the atmosphere of peace, a psychological anchor that gently readies your mind for rest. The hearth itself is the other, more tangible focal point of this domesticity. Now banked, its embers glow a deep, steady red, radiating a persistent, non-aggressive warmth. The hearth, or focus, is the traditional center of the Roman home, a place of cooking, light, and safety. Its slow, dying warmth is a gentle, natural signal that the day is done. The last sounds you hear are not shouting, but the soft shush of Lucius's hand, sweeping the last crumbs from the counter, and the low, careful clink as he covers the water jar for the night. The light in the taberna is now exclusively the soft, flickering light of a single oil lamp left burning near the shrine, and the deep red glow of the embers. The inn is finally still. The world outside, the vast, dangerous empire, feels distant, buffered by the thick stone walls and the quiet vigilance of the household gods. You find yourself smiling slightly, realizing that you are experiencing the quiet dignity of a working man's home, a fleeting, peaceful haven on the endless Roman road. You are back in your spot on the rough communal bench, or maybe you've already retreated upstairs, but for the final moments of the day, you absorb the deep, final calm that settles over the caupona. The single lamp near the shrine burns low, and the air is still, carrying only the faintest echo of the day's journey, and the rhythmic breathing of your fellow travelers. This is the final calm and historical fade, the moment the rough reality of the Roman road gives way to the gentle surrender of sleep. You reflect on this small, humble building. It wasn't built for beauty, but for absolute, essential utility. It has sheltered soldiers, merchants, officials, and ordinary citizens like you, connecting all of them to the single, massive entity that is the Roman Empire. The caupona is a powerful symbol of the Pax Romana, not the peace of silence or luxury, but the peace of a functioning, predictable system that allows travel and commerce to continue safely, even across vast, sometimes hostile, distances. This quiet function makes it a momentary, peaceful hub, a soft center in a hard world. The mainstream historical fact that resonates now is the sheer scale of the Roman road network itself. These roads, with the inns spaced at roughly a day's journey apart, represented a monumental investment in logistics. Without the predictable presence of places like Lucius's inn, the whole infrastructure would collapse. Your ability to simply pay a few coins and receive basic sustenance is a testament to the empire's power and organization. A quirky or fringe tidbit that comes to mind is the Roman concept of vacatio, the idea of taking a temporary break from labor. While Lucius never truly gets a vacatio, the inn provides this necessary pause for everyone else. For a few hours, the urgency of the road is forgotten. The worries about bandits, bad weather, or difficult terrain are suspended by these thick stone walls and the warmth of the banked hearth. The scholarly debate one last time centers on the emotional experience of travel. Historians still argue whether the exhaustion of travel in the ancient world led to a greater appreciation for simple domesticity, or if it simply heightened the desire for the luxuries left behind. For you, it's a bit of both. You appreciate the coarse bread and the rough blanket precisely because they are a guaranteed comfort, an end to uncertainty. You let the last sounds of the night wash over you, the soft, gentle crackle of the embers, the distant, low howl of a dog, the subtle thump of blood slowing down in your own body. You are safe. You are a part of a millennia-old stream of humanity, all moving, all stopping, all needing a place to rest. The details of the day, the tang of the posca, the scratchiness of the straw, the gentle humor of the dice game, begin to blur. The Roman world, so sharp and demanding just hours ago, begins to recede. Now, let your body become heavy. Allow your mind to drift away from the stone floor, the smoky air, and the distant creaking of the road. Feel the tension draining from your neck and shoulders, easing into the straw mattress beneath you. The shadows in the corner of the room soften, losing their sharp edges. The low, repetitive sounds of the inn, the soft snores, the settling wood, begin to blend into a single, continuous, comforting drone. There is no urgency here, only rest. The great Roman road continues its silent, endless stretch outside, but for you, the journey is over until the morning light. You are held safe in this quiet, historical space, suspended between one day and the next. Let the sounds of the ancient world lull you gently into a deep, peaceful rest.